Influencers, inspiration, and Instagram. This is Earned by Tribe Dynamics. Here's Conor Begley.
Welcome to Earned, everyone. Thanks for joining again. Today, we're going to learn from one of the top 5 influencer marketers in the world, by my estimation, Calum Watson. Thanks and welcome to the show, Calum.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on. I think that estimation might be a little bit off in that sense, but no, I appreciate the intro. Thank you, mate.
You might think, but not true. So the numbers that I was telling Calum about beforehand is that, so Gymshark is one of the top 5 brands that we track in the entire US by EMV. The brands that they are ahead of include Lululemon, Louis Vuitton, and Adidas for those in Europe. The numbers are pretty mind-boggling, and they continue to head in the opposite direction, right? You're growing and these are not. And so I think you definitely deserve that title. Obviously, there's a lot of people that contribute to that number within Gymshark, including Ben, but you're up there, mate.
I know, I appreciate it. And again, yeah, it just talks back to the amazing work the guys in Gymshark are doing, you know what I mean? It's a massive accomplishment for them, but we're by no means anywhere finished. We're just getting started.
A lot of room. Well, let's start off with a current topic. So obviously, I have a Peloton. Lots of people have a Peloton. Lots of people have had to figure out how to work out from home. I'm curious if that has, that same trend has positively affected you guys. Obviously, you had the home at 66 or something for 66, the 66 workout days from home. How has that trend impacted you guys, or has it actually hurt you?
Yeah, it's obviously with everything that's happened in the last year, things have just been flipped upside down. For us as a brand, we had to look at this situation and be like, right, how can we pivot and look to support as many people as possible and keep things moving forward? So I think we were quite lucky in a time where things were quite negative or quite impactful on a lot of people, not necessarily in the most positive way. We were quite fortunate to be able to keep growing and benefit off the back of this kind of home workout drive. A lot of people started getting up and running their couch to 5Ks and stuff like that. So for us, it's just a matter of pivoting to be able to distribute content and help people adapt to the new world that we're living in. So you would, like you've just mentioned, Peloton have had an incredible 12 to 18 months and they've seen this massive growth. But equally for us, a lot of things we did, whether it was through influencer marketing or through the content around social media, where we, when lockdown became a thing, we decided to change the name of our Twitter handle to Gymshark to help encourage people and remind people to stay at home. So there was a number of initiatives kind of that were set up off the back of this. So we soon realised in our own backyard, in our own industry, with gyms closing down in the United Kingdom, that there was a lot of personal trainers that would be out of work. So one of the initiatives we jumped on to set up was we'd never been on Twitch before, so we utilised that and we set up our Twitch account. And what we did was we got in touch, we reached out to lots of PTs, and basically we set up a live stream going from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day for about 3 or 4 months, where we'd book PTs in to run a 45-minute to 1 hour session, and we'd pay them the market rate. So there was opportunities for PTs to get a couple of hours a week on this live stream, so at least there was some form of income coming in, but also gave them a chance to promote them and their online businesses to other people that would come in and take part in the workouts. So again, from that point of view, we're trying to get people to pivot and work out from home and participate in these classes, but equally we're trying to give PTs an opportunity to have some form of income coming in, seeing that gyms were closed. We also did a fundraising scheme for the NHS, which is the British National Health Service. So we're encouraging people to get out and get sweaty and post their sweaty selfie. And for every sweaty selfie we got on Instagram, we donate £5. I think we ended up raising about £180,000, which is probably $220,000 for the NHS, which was really cool. So, and again, we've seen the whole shift in pivoting content as well. So we had a roster of Gymshark athletes where they were pivoting their content to provide a lot of home workouts and and solutions. You know what I mean? If people didn't have dumbbells, you had your baked beans, your cans of baked beans, or your gallon jugs of water and stuff like that. So it wasn't ideal, let's be honest. Like I myself personally, I'm not a fan of home workouts, so I was embracing the bulk as much as I could. But I think, it was just trying to be positive about it and just make the most of the situation we're in, just trying to push people to stay fit and healthy and stay on that journey, because that's the most important thing. It's like, it's all about the journey you're on. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter if you're just starting or if, you feel you're coming towards the end and you have your six pack and physique or whatever like that. Everyone's on a journey, and we just wanted to make sure that we could help support people continuing that journey to stay fit and healthy.
Yeah, I love that support that you provided back to the PTs, right? Because I think, some of the elements that you've talked about before is community building, right? And I think that's a concept we hear a lot about, but finding a way to drive value back to them, right? Not just see them as a way for you to drive sales or for you to drive exposure, but like, this is a mutually beneficial relationship, right? We're here to help you as well. That's super cool. I had no idea that you guys had done that. And that's a serious operation doing. You started a television network, basically, like content, 12 hours a day, every day of the week.
Yeah, there was a lot of hiccups in the initial couple of days trying to get the Twitch streams set up with the broadcast, because then you're obviously having to get the PTs to set up onto the broadcast to then stream from their house onto the Gymshark Twitch. And it was a couple of long nights, and I credit to Elf and his team, and a special shout out to one of the guys, Tom, in the social team, who really took the lead on that. And you know what I mean, he put countless hours into making that happen. So he was really the true hero behind that. I have to give it to him.
Yeah, I know about hiccups. I strongly encourage anybody who's listening to this to not listen to my first few episodes. They're pretty brutal. They get better over time, I promise. Well, let's take a step back. I want people to get to know who you are, right? So, growing up, you studied business and entrepreneurship, but you actually had an interest in history. What drew you to history? Because honestly, I think history is one of the hardest things for me to get interested in. And I know it's really important. I know history repeats itself, it rhymes, right? But what drew you to history in the first place?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think what drew me to history really was growing up in Ireland and in the schooling system in Ireland. You know what I mean? The Irish have quite a strong line of history. Over the last couple of hundred years, from the oppression with the British Empire through to the mass migration of Irish citizens and over to the US because of the famine. You know what I mean? So like, we've got this really rich and deep, sense of history within the Republic of Ireland. So I think a lot of that came from, there was obviously this element of pride on my end of learning about my nation's history, but equally as well, I think the more I learned about the history and how much had actually happened in the past, I think it just started developing that interest. And then you'd start going into looking at World War I, World War II, and I don't know, I felt like I'm quite a curious person, and I feel like, I think a lot of people look at history as, boring old textbooks, but actually there's so much incredible information. And if you have an element of curiosity, when it comes to looking back in the past, you can find yourself for hours on end learning about other areas or events that's happened in the past. So I think for me, it probably was just learning about my heritage, the element of pride, and obviously all the incredible events that had happened in the past. That was just quite of interest to me. But then equally as well, when it came to school, I felt like, because I was interested in it, I had this ability to remember a lot. So when it came to like exams and stuff like that, I always scored quite high in history. So that probably helped that probably pushed me towards leaning towards doing history as a teacher or as a career, just because it was something I was good at and something I was interested at. But then obviously there was a bit of a moment which led me to go to business management and entrepreneurship. It was coming close to the deadline. So like in Ireland, when you're finishing high school, you have to submit your CAO application. That's basically your preferred college courses that you want to do and which colleges. And once you hit a deadline, you can't change it. You have to wait another year. And I was getting to I think it was 5-10 minutes before the CAO deadline. I was kind of had that moment where I was kind of like, oh God, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my life? Because I'm going to have to go to college for the next 4 years. Like, shit, is this really what I want to do? So literally last minute, I was just thinking, I was talking to my mom, I was like, I don't know, like, not to take away from being a teacher or whatever, you know, I mean, they're doing a phenomenal job, but I was like, I think back then I was like, you know what, no, I kind of want to see how successful I can be, and I think back then as well, I would have been thinking about the money side of things, you know what I mean, just being a young teenager as well. So I was like, you know what, what's going to make me money? And then I was like, you know what, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to be a businessman. So like literally 5 minutes before the deadline, I found that business management entrepreneurship course. I seen entrepreneurship, I was like, I want to be an entrepreneur, so I signed up and did that. And to be fair, it's one of the best decisions I've ever made, you know what I mean, in the grand scheme of things. When I went on to do that course, I learned so much, and obviously inevitably that's led me to work for this amazing brand. And
I mean, those little decisions, right? Like I was similar, right? I was graduating from high school and deciding where I wanted to go to school, and I'd filled out all the forms for this other school, right? It's a school called UC Santa Barbara, and it is a dream school. Like, it is on the beach, beautiful weather every day, great educational system, right? And the other school I was considering, which is the school I ended up going to, was the school that my mom, dad, aunt, uncle, grandma, grandpa had all gone to this same school, which I think was part of the reason that I didn't want to go there. And then I had all the forms filled out, and all I had to do was click the button to like submit to go to this school. And at the last second, I ended up doing some research and was like, no, like, I'm going to the other school.
Yeah.
And you know, I met my wife there. I met now my business partner there, right? Like, so if I hadn't made, like, I was one click away, like literally just click, move on with life, and my life would have been totally different, right? So
crazy, isn't it?
Yeah. And then on the history side, as I'm sure you can tell, my first name is actually quite Irish.
It is indeed.
So the way I've found consuming history for me to be the most effective is I really like the historical fiction genre, right? Which is like, you're reading a story about that time that, you know, helps you get insight into what it was like, but it is also fictional in nature. So it's kind of got some of that to it. And that's actually what I was named after. There's a book called Trinity by Leon Uris, who I was named after. And turns out there's a lot of us. There's like Facebook groups I've been invited to that are like, were you named after Conor? I can't remember his last name. So, and it's a historical fiction. So it's, yeah.
Cool, man, that's cool.
Well, let's keep going. So, you know, after uni, right, you went to Myprotein.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, one of the things that we talk about, and then you ran the influencer program there, and there's a whole story there that I'd love to, you know, we can talk about. But one of the things that I think is really interesting that we talk a lot about when it comes to success in the influencer space is that relationships travel, right? So the relationships that you build at one company will come with you, just like the relationships you would build with, you know, the editor of a magazine or otherwise. Did any of those relationships come with you when you came to Gymshark, or was it kind of starting from ground zero?
No, I think you're spot on. I think relationships can travel. I think a lot of it comes down to the time and effort you put into it, and ultimately the respect you put out into the world. So like the kind of the one thing I always had growing up, and you know, I mean, my mom would always be saying to me is kind of like, give people the level of respect that you wish to get back. And I feel like that's obviously, you know, I mean, it's one of those lessons you learn growing up that you take into it. And especially because I'd moved over to a different country, you know, I mean, I didn't know anybody. I went over on my own, so it was kind of like you're almost having to make an extra effort to network and build up your network around you, and you know, I mean, making friends and stuff like that. So I think I was very lucky in the sense that I got to meet a lot of incredible people. But also along the way as well, at the start of my career, you also get to learn about different people as well. You know what I mean? Whether people who had let you down, or people who had kind of gone behind your back, or people who had offered false promises. So you learn both sides of the scale almost. But I made a lot of amazing connections and friendships at my days at Myprotein, and you know, I mean, some were with, you know, I mean, the staff were. A perfect example is Ash Wilson, who was my old boss at Myprotein. I'd gone to Gymshark, and probably about 6 months later he'd followed me down to, I remember he was still at Myprotein, and I think I'd just been to the Nikki Blackketter season 2 pop-up store in LA. So I'm over in LA with Ben, Noel, Mitch and the gang for the Nicky pop-up store, and there's queues wrapped around the block, and we're there with all the athletes and having an amazing time. And he's sitting back there in Manchester at his desk looking at his mate, living the high life. As what the high life is what you would see on Instagram. Obviously it's not necessarily it, but I got back from LA, and I drove up to Manchester to catch up with him, because I'd still go up to Manchester to catch up with him, and we get a lift in and just chat, because like he'd kind of almost become my big brother when I was over in the UK, and one of my best friends. So we'd be catching up, and he'd be like, "Man, I'm so jealous." Like, Gymshark, because when we were at Myprotein, we always looked at Gymshark. Gymshark's the A side, it's the A team, you know what I mean, in the fitness industry. Yeah. So we were always looking at Gymshark, being like, "Oh, look at all those like Steve Cook, Whitney Simmons. Like, how can we do that, or how can we do something like on their level?" So like we were always like both fans of the brand, and then obviously I was working there, and he was like, "Man, I'm so jealous of you," so on. And then I think it got to a point with him in his career. I remember at like 11 o'clock in the evening one night, I just got a phone call from him. He's like, "Set up the meeting, please." He's like, I want a conversation with the guys.
It's time.
Yeah. So I called Noel straight away. I said, "Listen, look, this guy especially, he's incredible what he's done. I've learned a lot from him." And I was like, genuinely, he'll do big things here at this brand. I was like, just get in front of him, sit down and have a conversation with him. And yeah, the following week, Ash drove down to Redditch in Birmingham, met with Ben and Noel. They had a good conversation, and then he's here now. He's heading up our campaign and creative department, and so all the incredible creative campaigns and content you would have seen coming out in the Gymshark channels over the last couple of years. That comes down to him and his team. So they've done a phenomenal job. So yeah, no, and we're still best friends to this day. It's incredible.
That's so cool.
He's on his way to becoming a dad now this year and stuff like that. So it's crazy. We often sit back and reflect on kind of our days up in Manchester to where we are now in Birmingham, and how grateful we are, and how our lives are changing. It's amazing. So it's definitely worth. When it comes to carrying relations on, those ones that you build strong connections with, don't let go, and keep them close to you.
Yeah, the phrase I always really liked was, it's fun to look around and realize that your friends are becoming badasses, right? Like, whoa, like look at what so-and-so's doing. Like, there's a kid I know in high school who's like a neurosurgeon now. It's like, what the fuck? Like, it's cool. And I think that's, that happens obviously with age, right? Like, we're getting to that point where people had enough time in their careers to accomplish just really, really cool stuff, even in a short period of time.
The one thing that always stuck with me, and especially since being coming to Gymshark, it's surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals. Like I always say, and the one thing I've learned is surround yourself with people that will go above and beyond for you, but equally they'll challenge you and push you. And I feel like I've been very, very lucky to have those people around me. So I'm in a position where I'm not afraid to fail, and I'm not afraid to try new things and really push the boundaries, but because I know I have people who will support me and they have my back, but equally I have people who will challenge me and will be brutally honest with me, and keep pushing me to be better every day. So I think if there's one thing people can take away from it is you surround yourself with like-minded individuals that are going to keep pushing you.
Yeah, there's a really good book called Founder's Dilemma, where he looks at, I think it's like 10,000 different companies, and then looks at the initial formation of that team, right? And then sees what predicts success. And one of the things that they look at is, what is the pre-existing relationship before you start a company? So are you friends? Are you family? Were you former coworkers? Or were you just acquaintances, right? You didn't know each other. And then you look at success rate, right? The highest success rate is former coworkers, right? So if you worked together in the past and you choose to work together again, you're the most likely to be successful. Then it's friends, then it's random acquaintances, then it's family, right? At the bottom of the list in terms of who most frequently is successful. And the thing that he looks at is, okay, well, why are friends less successful than former coworkers? He's like, well, the problem with friendship is when you go into a business and you're friends before, you have that relationship and you don't want to hurt it, right? So you're less likely to give people the feedback that they need on how to get better. Versus former coworkers, you're used to that kind of feedback loop. And then with family, it's even worse than that, right? Because you're like, okay, I don't want to tell this person they're bad at their job because they're my family, right? And so we had a conversation early on, John and I, where I was like, hey, we've got to be, John's my co-founder, like we have to be honest with each other. Like you have to give me feedback if things aren't working, and I'm going to be good at accepting it, right? So I'm 100% in line. You have to be able to get that kind of feedback. Otherwise, you end up in an emperor's clothes situation, right? You're naked and you don't know it. So
yeah, absolutely. Especially like the family thing. I couldn't even imagine that, just because there's that emotional element as well, isn't it? Because again, it is family. But yeah, I think if you hit the nail on the head, and even just how you list them out, like, and you try take what you've just listed and you apply it to your own personal life, and you're looking at different relationships, and it's very true.
Yeah. So let's talk about one of those people, right? So Ben founded it, right? Long time ago when he was a young kid. And I think, and now it's been valued, for those that don't know, got valued at £1 billion. So you're thinking about $1.3 billion, depending upon the exchange rate. And I think, and he continues to lead the company. And I think one of the things that I've heard talked about that I really like is that often founders can't scale with the business, right? So the business basically outgrows you, and it doesn't seem like it's outgrown him. What do you think what has he done that's allowed him to continue to scale with a business that's just way beyond what somebody his age would typically be handling?
I think there's two things. I think Ben's self-awareness and his humility is on a whole new level. So I think as Gymshark began to grow and started hitting this rapid growth a couple of years ago when Ben was CEO, I think Ben had that level of self-awareness and humility to be able to bring in Steve Hewitt and Paul Richardson in to kind of take the reins of the company and help put the foundations in to allow it to come to the next level. So I think the reason why Ben's been able to continue to grow with Gymshark is his self-awareness. It's his humility. He's so humble in his approach. But equally as well, I think goes back to the point I was saying, he's surrounded himself with really great people that are constantly challenging him every day, but also there to push him to be the next best possible person he can be, you know what I mean? And really help grow Gymshark into becoming the biggest and best brand in the world. So I think it's probably a combination of those three things, self-awareness, humility, and then it's his inner circle, those people he has, I think we're very lucky to have someone like Steve Hewitt, who's the CEO of Gymshark. Like I don't think there's many, if any, CEOs out there in the world like Steve in his approach, his humility, his approachability. You know what I mean? And he obviously works very closely with Ben, almost as a mentor as well. So there's this really good dynamic within the senior leadership at Gymshark to allow Ben to do his role as founder, but equally Ben is so self-aware that he's brought in people and given them the autonomy to do what they need to do. You know what I mean? So like when I joined Gymshark and I came in as a sponsorship manager, and there was eventually that opportunity for me to come in and head up the sponsorship team, it wasn't a case of Ben needs to be involved in everything. It was, do you know what? You're the best person for this job. You know it better than I do. Here you go. You run with that. I'm always here to support you, whatever you may need. But you have the autonomy to do what you do best. And I think that's so important. I think that's, from all the conversations and the people you network, I feel like that's probably one of the things that a lot of founders or businesses don't necessarily understand. Because equally, you see it in a lot of businesses, and I would have seen it in past businesses that I worked for, that as a company scales and grows, sometimes the company will maybe take a certain element from you and your department only to give someone that focus so you can do less better. And sometimes I think people will look at that in a negative way, be like, oh, you're taking stuff away from me. But yeah, equally they might be taking stuff away from you so you can do a really good job of one thing rather than a mediocre job of multiple things. So I think that always talks back to like how Ben's been able to grow with the company. Is rather than trying to hold on to everything, it's, if I'm not the best person for this, let's find the best person for it and let them run with it.
It's a super hard thing to learn. I mean, because, one, it's typically like, I can talk from personal experience. It's usually almost all of your material wealth, right, is in this one business. You started there at the beginning, so you're very invested in the problem. And so, being able to be hands off is difficult, and being able to focus is difficult. I mean, this happened with us about 2 years ago, and those that have listened to other podcasts are going to get annoyed at hearing this again, but I was traveling probably 40% of the time. So I wasn't in office. And I also had about 60 or 70% of the company reporting into me. right? And the problem was I was never there because when I was traveling, I was not available. And and on top of that, my co-founder who led the other half, John, he would, try and step in, but he didn't have any context, right? For like, hey, you've got this problem, I'm trying to solve it. I don't know what the context is of this scenario. And so he made a pivot about 2 years ago to have him focus entirely internally and to have me focus entirely externally. And it took time to kind of grow, but now it's like so cool. Like I spend so much time like doing the podcast. We've got Clubhouse. I'm meeting with clients. I'm doing press. I'm doing all this stuff that that's just allowing me to do what I'm good at, right? And also allowing other people to do what they're good at. And so it's been it's a tough thing to learn, right? But that's cool that he figured it out so early.
So here's a question for you. Turn the podcast.
Yeah, go for it.
What was the biggest battle you faced then within those first couple of months doing that?
I mean, honestly, it's just an ego thing, right? Yeah. It's like saying like, hey, I'm going to take 60% of the company that's reporting to me and they're not going to report to me anymore, right? They're all going to report to John. And so that was, that's a big ego thing. Yeah. But I think that knowing the thing that really got me through it and that I have advised other people on, and I've heard it described in a variety of different ways, right? The way that always seems the easiest is people have superpowers, right? And they have weaknesses, right? They have your kryptonite, and you have your things that you're incredibly good at. And there are certain things in the world that I have a chance of being in the top 1% of anybody in the world at doing this or higher, right? And so I want to focus on those things where I can be so much better than everybody else that like if I put time, effort, focus into it, the results are going to be really strong, right? Like I remember I do a lot of speaking and I was like, I'm going to get a speech coach. And people are like, why? Like, you're a good speaker. I'm like, because I want to get better. Like, this is something that I'm inherently really good at. Ironically, I didn't even end up liking this speech coach and they gave me a lot of bad advice, but like, it doesn't really matter, right? Not the point. So I think ego was the hardest part for sure. Because that's what you're told is like managing people is success. And I don't think it always has to be. So, yeah.
That's cool, man. No, I respect that. I think a lot of people get a lot of value from that.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's, our company's doing really well and I've never been happier in terms of anyways, let's keep going. Let's talk about you. So for you, let's talk about you for growth, right? Like, obviously Ben had to scale. You had to scale too. The company today is much different than it was when you joined. What were some of your growing pains? What were some of the hardest things for you during that growth period? Yeah,
that's a really good question. I think, number one, fundamentally, because the company was growing so quickly, so many opportunities were coming, and sometimes like we had some of the biggest fitness influencers and some like massive names reaching out to us on social media, and like I think sometimes as well is knowing when to say no. So I think for us as a brand and as a program with influencer marketing, it was really kind of, when you're experiencing such rapid growth, it's making sure that you don't get distracted and you don't drift off and you stay true to your purpose and stay true to what your North Star is. So that's probably been one of the biggest difficulties we've had with all these amazing opportunities. And you'd have big celebrities or sports teams and franchises reaching out wanting to work with you, and it's kind of like, these are all amazing opportunities, but does that tie back to what our purpose is? Does that tie back to does that help us reach our North Star and stuff? So I think staying on course has probably been one of the biggest challenges. The other one as well is kind of like, when you work with influencers, you're working with people, and I think a lot of businesses and companies don't necessarily understand or realize that. You know what I mean? I think a lot of companies, when it comes to influencer marketing, it's very transactional, and it's we pay you X, you do Y, and that's not how we do things at Gymshark. You know what I mean? It's all about it's a mutually beneficial partnership. It's what can we do to help you and give you value of you being associated with Gymshark. You know what I mean? What can we do to help you? And equally, this is how we see you helping us as a brand. So it's making sure that as the landscape gets more and more competitive, it's how do we constantly evolve our offering and keep close relationships with all of our athletes, and how do we keep offering value to them? How do we help them set up their own businesses, help them with their personal branding, giving them opportunities, camera equipment, all that sort of stuff. So it's always just constantly, how can we keep offering value to the people we work with, and staying ahead of the curve as well, because It's one of those things. There's a lot of companies out there that will look to Gymshark as to what are they doing, what are they going to do next. So I'd say that's the other thing is staying ahead of the curve, keeping your ears to the ground, and constantly pivoting when you need to. You know what I mean? I think we're very lucky as a business. We're quite agile. You know what I mean? And a lot of people will compare us to the likes of Nike, Lulu, Under Armour, Adidas, those big apparel brands. And you know what I mean? We're on our way to hopefully one day becoming an apparel brand of that capacity and size. But I think the one advantage we probably have over those companies is just how agile we are as a brand and as a business. So, but with that being said as well, there's always loads of challenges there. How you have to continue to be scrappy and entrepreneurial with your approach, and it's kind of always that battle between how much red tape and processes are involved internally throughout departments and how you do things. So I think a lot of it's just naturally growing pains, isn't it, as a company grows. But I think we've experienced a lot of growing pains very quickly because of the growth of the company. So it's there's you can't really pinpoint one or two massive growth pains. I think a lot of it
just feels like a growth pain all the time, right? Like when you're growing that fast, you're just going from one pain point to the next. Like,
you put
fix
one
this.
Fire
oh
out.
God, fix that.
You put one fire out. You put one fire out. You're like, woo, and then all of a sudden over your shoulder, you're like, oh shit, there's another fire, and you're going to put that one out. But again, that's the fun thing about it. You know what I mean? It's you have all these cliches, but like, every day's different at work and stuff like that. And you know what? In a lot of sense, there's probably a lot of jobs and companies out there that have that. But like, I feel like I can truly say like no day is the same. You know what I mean? I get to work with a lot of incredible individuals on quite a regular basis, so that element is quite the same for me, which I love, because again, like I said, I work with people who challenge me every day, but equally I work with people that I've got to see and help grow as well, which is amazing. You know what I mean? There's so many incredible minds at Gymshark, honestly, so many amazing minds, and that's just been an incredible thing to be a part of as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean the way I've heard it described. So when we first started Tribe, John and I were like 24, 25 years old, right? So all things considered, pretty young. Not as young as Ben, but pretty young. And it felt like things were on fire. And Steve, who's on our board, who's been a CFO for 20, 25 years, has seen a lot. He's like, guys, this is how it is at every company. He's like, it's like a duck on the water. He's like, you look at your competitors and all you see is above the water. They're just like swimming along. He's like, but underneath, they're like furiously kicking.
Yeah.
And he's like, and that is every single company. Yeah. They're all like that.
It's that whole iceberg analogy, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's what you all you see is above water, but then under the water there's this huge iceberg that it's just things you never see.
Yeah. Let's talk about your athletes for a second. You mentioned them there. I mean, that's a pretty big part of your program, right? And I think what's interesting for me when you talk about them, and from my observation, is you're approaching it very differently than a lot of the brands, right? And a lot of the kind of newer brands. And what I mean by that is, one of the biggest mistakes that we see is brands come in and they treat it like a media buy, right? Like, I'm going to find these athletes, I'm going to pay them, or these influencers, I'm going to pay them to talk about me, and then I'm going to move on to the next set and the next set and the next set and the next set. Versus, the Nike model, right? Where it's like, hey, we're partnering with LeBron for the rest of his life. Like, it's going to be that long. Like, that's how long the partnership is. And it seems like you guys are modeling yourselves off of that much more than the former, right? How do you think about that in terms of your relationships with them?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because like those different models that you talk about, it's like, I feel like a lot of brands are pivoting towards the long-term ambassadorship model now because of the competitive landscape that it is. But like, I feel like, again, going back to like, Ben was definitely one of the pioneers of influencer marketing 8 years ago when he started like just reaching out to his favorite YouTubers and in like the small fitness community. And I think it really, to be honest, it really derived from that. You know what I mean? It was building relationships with people who believed in the brand, and that kind of went from finding people who had an influence, that were passionate about the brand and advocates about the brand and wanted to help grow the brand, that developed into these long-term partnerships. And I feel like that was we talk like we are a community brand, we're a human brand, and we have, one of the key focuses for us has always been about the Gymshark community and growing the community. And for us to just have loads of little small partnerships here, there and everywhere over the last couple of years, it wouldn't have been authentic in that sense. So it's kind of like we kind of stumbled upon long-term partnerships back when long-term partnerships weren't necessarily a thing within influencer space. It was long-term partnerships with professional sports stars, with your Adidas and Nike and stuff like that. And then in the influencer space, it was just like one-off posts. But then what we realized was, in order to bring people into your community and do it in an authentic way, there needs to be that time to build that connection with them. You need that time to build that rapport with them. So that's why, it's part of the reason why we've been able to build this amazing community, is because of all these long-term ambassadors and athletes that we've had on board. They've brought their community on the journey with them and integrated their community as a part of the Gymshark community. So I think you could look at it, we've probably taken the best of both worlds. We haven't signed anyone on a lifetime agreement like Nike have. But again, anyone we want to work with, we want to invest in them. It's not just a transactional, we pay you X and you do Y. If we're going to do this together, we're in it together, and let's focus on the long term. Give them the financial security that they deserve. And equally, we know it takes more than just a couple of posts to bring someone into our community. So, but then that's not to say
I'm excited for your first lifetime partnership. I think it will happen before this is all said and done. But that's just my prediction. You keep going.
Who knows? But then again, that's not to say that short-term partnerships don't have a play. They don't have a role in building up your ecosystem, building up your community. You know what I mean? So I think long-term, short-term, they all have their own benefits. I think the objectives and the goals need to be quite specific and determined before you jump into it. But yeah, I truly believe in long-term partnerships, and again, like I said, it's you're working with humans here. You know what I mean? You're dealing with humans here, and influencers, athletes. They're so powerful, and if they truly believe in something, their community will buy into it, and their community will back them and believe in it, and that's one of the things we've always tried to focus on as well. Is like I said to you, we've had some massive names reach out before to us, but they always just saw it as a paycheck, or or a bit of clout to be working with a brand like ours. And I'm comfortable and happy to say that anyone who we work with, all of our athletes, ambassadors, they're 100% bought into the brand. They want to see Gymshark go on and do incredible things. They genuinely believe in what we're setting out to achieve and what our goals and North Star is. So that forms an even bigger part of what we do. You know what I mean? That everyone that represents the brand genuinely believes in it. And that's true advocacy, and you can't get more authentic than that.
Yeah, 100%. It's the thing that I like, right? So one of the best parts about doing this podcast is, we have theories, right? So we observe oh wow, Gymshark is significantly outpacing Adidas, right? And then we talk to you guys, and it's what we thought was working is working, right? This is the approach that works. Now, obviously, there's different flavors, but it's just so cool. It's so cool to have that validated. So let's talk about community building from an international perspective, right? So, I understand how you built it in the UK because, of course, Ben started it, just started working with these people. It grew over time, but you are personally in the US for a reason right now. And it seems like from the numbers that we see, the U.S. is growing really quickly for you guys, at least from an EMV perspective. How did you go about building community kind of in these other regions? And I know you're in other regions as well. Mm-hmm. How did you think about that? How did you initially start to seed the relationships out here?
I think this came back to the early days of Gymshark, even before myself, and the early days of when Ben was sending out product to August, Lovato, Lex, Nikki Blackketter, and the original Gymshark athletes. And it's one of these things with social media as well, is these guys have followers all over the world. And I think it was only until Gymshark went to its first body power in 2014, and we flew, the guys flew August, Jeff Said, Lovato, all the guys, these guys over from the US, and they had Lex come down from up north in the UK, and then Alan Gabai from Germany. And at this expo, nobody realized actually how passionate and how big these guys' communities were until they got to the expo, until they'd sold out at the Body Power. And then I think that kind of stemmed on the idea for Ben and the guys to be like, you know what, actually let's try out some of these other expos. And obviously you have the LA Fit Expo normally on in January every year, and you have the Olympia. So the guys went on a bit of a world tour at these different expos. And to be honest, I don't think we realized the community or the audience we had in the US until we went there. And when the guys went to the LA Fit Expo and you had these 6-hour queues, people swarming around the stand. And I think what then they realized is, like, through influencer marketing, we've been able to put our product out in front of these different audiences all over the world. So I think you have obviously, in today's world as well, you have your paid media strategies and you can target people in Nebraska, for example. But I think organically, the brand was growing through the use of influencer marketing, and through the combination of influencer marketing and then our Gymshark's own social profiles. I think that really started gaining that organic traction. And it wasn't really like verified or validated until the guys went over for the LA Fit Expo and seen thousands of kids turning up to the Gymshark stand, and all the other stands were just like, of the supplement stands were just empty. So I think that, and I suppose advice to other brands and businesses out there, if they're looking at targeting specific markets, it's kind of like, it's looking at people who are relevant within those markets and have an audience, an engaged audience in those markets. It's like, you can't be super targeted to a certain extent, but if you're looking to drive that like organic growth, it's creating authentic and engaging content with those influencers, and then being consistent across your channels as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think we tell people a lot, because there's all kinds of ways that you can target people. You can target them based on audience demographics, audience location, whatever. And the thing that we really focus on is, like, this is all about passion, right? Wherever this person is, if they've got a lot of passion for your category and are really passionate about your brand, that's a good person for you to work with. They can be based in the Netherlands. If they've got a really big audience, right, they're going to have an impact globally, not just in the Netherlands, because the internet isn't regional, right? Like, if you speak, the biggest thing is just language, right? If you speak English, you're going to have an impact in all the countries that speak English. If you speak Spanish, you're going to have an impact in the countries that speak Spanish. Like, that's the one barrier we found, where, like, people don't like watching translated videos all that much. But yeah, no, it's a total side benefit of this influencer space, is how much easier it makes global expansion.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, like, one of the perfect examples was when Logan Paul went to Dubai. I think something like 20,000 people turned up at the Mall of Dubai, just to see Logan Paul. I was like, this is a kid who was putting out YouTube videos from the US. You know what I mean? So I think it's if people can understand that, the internet doesn't have barriers. I think there's tools that you can leverage, of course, from a paid media perspective to be more targeted. But when it comes to the influencer space, it's like they can be from Dublin, Ireland, but have a global audience, and that's kind of I suppose that's the interesting but fun part of it as well, is actually seeing where they resonate and kind of what the surprises can be when they turn up in a certain location or a certain city or country. Yeah.
So you mentioned organic earlier, and I'd be curious to get your perspective here, right? Because when we measure the data, you'll look at 90% of the content, 95% of the content created about Gymshark is organic, just by the influencers, let alone the consumers. And of course, there's a lot of time and effort and money spent on paid relationships. How do you guys think about balancing those two? And then how do you think about, when you're thinking about who you want to bring on as a paid partner, what are some of the criteria that you guys use when you're thinking about that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. It's one of those things. It's like we look at it like an ecosystem. You know what I mean? It's like this entire ecosystem surrounding Gymshark. It's one of those things, right? We tend to keep the ambassador / athlete roster relatively exclusive. We'll bring on X amount of people per year, because there is that prestige associated with being a part of Gymshark or being a Gymshark athlete. So we're quite not limited, but we tend to keep to a certain amount of people every year. But then the issue is, if we were just to focus on that, you kind of shoot yourself in the foot, because there's so many amazing creators out there in the world that we'd be missing out on. So, you know what I mean? Steph and our PR team have this incredible this incredible seeding strategy, and you know what I mean, those are the guys and girls who are out networking, those social butterflies, and you know what I mean, they're amazing at what they do, and you know what I mean, they can truly bring people into the Gymshark bubble and fall in love with the brand and build this advocacy, because again, it's just genuine, authentic approach, you know what I mean? And I think that talks back to anyone who works at Gymshark, you know what I mean? It's just authentic people, you know what I mean, genuine people who want to see the brand do better. So like our PR team have this really successful seeding strategy, but then equally going back to like the long-term side of things sit with our athlete roster, but then equally, you know what I mean, you can leverage the short-term partnerships on a more campaign basis or strategic level, and that's where Sophie and our influencer marketing team do an amazing job of creating authentic and engaging content that drives value. So it's like, you kind of have to look at it like an ecosystem, you know what I mean? And every partnership, every activation has to have a purpose. I think like you and I were talking about like some of the, say, you look at fashion brands or other retail brands out there, and do you know what? Sometimes it's just brand awareness for them to focus on. Brand awareness, get your product out in front of as many people and as many cool kids as possible. And with everything that's going on with culture, social media, if you get the cool kids in your product, you know what I mean, there's a really good opportunity of that to pick up. Like you look at essentials at the moment. Everybody wants an essentials tracksuit. And it's not because, and this is not to take credit away from essentials, it's not because they've done anything incredible. It's a tracksuit, but they've done a really good job of marketing the tracksuit and putting it on culturally relevant people who are super influential and super cool. And then all of a sudden, and don't get me wrong, the products look dope as well, but then everybody wants one, you know what I mean? And they create this scarcity model where it sells out and they're reselling on StockX for 4 times the cost. And I think that's almost that like organic traction you can't pay for. And I think that just it goes back to when we talk about Gymshark, it's like the whole organic side of things is again, we're not there to sell a pair of leggings, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. We're there to unite the conditioning community, and that's our purpose. And everything always has to talk back to that purpose. So I think because we focus on a mission statement, a brand-led purpose, and building a community, the organic growth we see is so much stronger than what other businesses would see, because if people are just trying to pay for it, you're just forcing it. You know what I mean? There's no real reasoning behind why people would purchase a brand or post about a brand or represent a brand. So I think it's because we focus on our North Star and focus on having a purpose of uniting the conditioning community. It's not about selling X amount of pairs of leggings or sports bras per year. You know what I mean? And I think they're the two different business models. We're building a brand. Others are building companies or building businesses to value and sell at X amount, you know what I mean, or to hit revenue targets. That's not what we're about, you know what I mean? And I think that's why we can go on and see this organic growth, because we're focusing on the community element. We're focusing on just making this incredible brand that helps people.
Yeah. Have you read the Shoe Dog, the book by Phil Knight?
Yeah.
Yeah. There's some elements, right, of that I think they built out. Specifically the running movement in like the 70s and 80s, right?
Yeah, back
like
in
they
Oregon.
really built it. Yeah.
So I read a quote the other day, and it's stuck with me for so long, because we were having loads of great like internal conversations within on our brand board. So a lot of the senior leaders in brand, and again talking back to like people who, you know, surround yourself with like-minded individuals. And one of the things that always talks back to me, and I feel like it's quite, you see it with like Brewdog, you see it with Patagonia, you see a lot of companies now really staying true to their purpose. But purpose unlocks bold moves, and I think that's really, really important. Because again, that allows you, if you have a purpose and you have a North Star and you stay true to that, I think a lot of great things will come off the back of it. And I think, like I was saying to you with our growing pains, there's plenty of times and opportunities or distractions to move us away from what our purpose was. But because we had this purpose and this focus as a brand, it allowed us to stay focused and keep moving forward through all the distractions.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's tough to come up with a purpose as a brand that people can get behind and that also doesn't feel, inauthentic, right? That doesn't feel fake or forced. So it's cool. I heard a phrase, I've said this, I think I need to stop saying that. that I really dug, which was, it was just yesterday. It's like until people start making fun of it, then it hasn't stuck, right? So it sounds like that phrase internally has gotten to the point where like everybody knows what it is, and now it probably gets made fun of every once in a while, but like this is the mission, right? And everybody's on board and knows the direction they're heading.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk, these are kind of hard numbers, and then we'll get into some fun questions, and I think I've almost taken an hour of your time already. So for you guys, kind of hard KPIs, do you guys have any hard KPIs that you think about when you're working with influencers and the kind of the broader community? Or is it more, is that not as important for you guys?
I think having measurements, quantifiable and qualitative, like goals and measurements is important. You need to have something to be able to refer back to. But I think it comes back to like when it works, like when you're talking about like different partnerships or different campaigns. I think every partnership serves its own purpose and it should have its own goal. Likewise, every campaign should have its own goal and objective. So I think as we've grown as a brand, it becomes harder to have set KPIs or set numbers to put across the entire roster or ecosystem. But there's definitely ways we look at things to kind of quantify or measure how we're doing. So like again, using the Tribe Dynamics platform to understand kind of what's our share of voice in the market, looking at like how many views we're receiving on a monthly basis, engagements, impressions, all that sort of stuff. But then equally looking at your sentiment as well, looking at brand sentiment.
Yeah.
It's this whole thing of, you could get an influencer to post a standard picture in your product, and yes, you can call that brand awareness, but like how many people have truly registered that image or video or your brand? You know what I mean? I think this is where it comes back to like content needs to truly be authentic, captivating, engaging, and to have a purpose. So yeah, I mean, there is those measurements and KPIs you look at to give you a broad overview. So when I'm sitting down with other stakeholders within the business, I do have numbers to talk back to, but equally you can't let the numbers kind of can't let the numbers decide what you do. They can't dictate what you do. And that's the difficulty, that's the balance you need to have. And I think my position within the business, I think they're the conversations I need to, or I should be having, or I am having around that balance between the numbers don't dictate what we do, because ultimately, again, our purpose here is to unite the conditioning community.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, let's get to a couple fun end of show questions, and then we'll move on. End our Friday.
Cool.
So you've been spending a lot of time traveling, right, between the U.S. and Europe, and I'm a big beer fan, right? So I'd love to know, do you prefer European beer or U.S. beer? What's your preference?
Well, I'm a Guinness man. You know what I mean? I wouldn't be much of an Irishman if I wasn't a Guinness man. So, no. So yeah, like normally I drink Guinness, but if I was to drink beer. Yeah,
that's funny that you don't even call it Guinness.
I like American beer.
It's like there's Guinness and then there's beer.
Yeah, that's it. Guinness is a stout, man. You know what I mean? It's a different kettle of fish. It's it's that creaminess you don't get in a beer anyway. But I like American beer. You know what I mean? Because I've spent so much time in the States over the last couple of years, so you kind of acquire a taste of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean that's they're making some good stuff out here. So we'll do one more kind of U.S. versus Europe question here. So I know you're a big sports fan, and you played sports growing up.
Yeah.
Have you been able to adopt any of the U.S. sports, any basketball or football, or is it still all actual football? What's the verdict?
Yeah. So I grew up playing football, which to the Americans is soccer, and I played basketball all my life. So I've always played basketball all my life. So whenever I can get over to the US, it's always great to be able to watch like some of the college games and watch some of the NBA games at a normal time and not having to stay up till all hours. Yeah,
that makes sense. Well, I really appreciate you taking out the time, Calum. I know I learned a lot today, and I know people are really going to dig this one. So
I
appreciate you taking out the time, for us and for them. And happy Friday. Thanks again.
Cheers, Conor. Thanks very much, mate.
All right. Bye, Calum.
Hit subscribe now. Earned by Tribe Dynamics. Tribe Dynamics unlocks your social media influencer community. Our platform not only tracks and measures your best influencer relationships, but discovers new influencers to grow your business through earned media. Get started with a demo today at tribedynamics.com. tribedynamics.com.